And a happy Tuesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. It is still continuing to be a very quiet stretch of weather as we go into the midway portion of the work week now. But we do have a little bit of a better idea about our weekend rain chances, and we do have something to talk about with some of those high temperatures that we have for the rest of the work week. But first and foremost, I do want to talk about yet another fire danger statement. Now, you are going to see here at the bottom that this date is for yesterday, but I promise you that we do have a fire danger statement for all of Central Georgia once again. We just didn't get the graphic from the National Weather Service today, and the only real change that we're seeing is the winds have shifted direction coming out of the south at the same speed, 5 to 10 miles per hour. But that southerly component is going to be important over the course of today. It may get us out of these fire danger statements as we go into tomorrow, because when you start to get a southerly component to your wind, it's ushering in moisture from down in the Gulf, in the Atlantic Ocean. So that's going to do a very good thing and get the relative humidity values above that 25% threshold. But for today, once again, they are going to be less than 25% during the afternoon and maybe a little bit into the evening. And also with the combination of dry vegetation, controlled burning of any sorts is going to be strongly discouraged, because any fires that could develop can spread very rapidly. We were talking about it in the morning show this morning. We had a brush fire in Jones County as of last Thursday. And take a look at this shot. This was up in Murray County, Georgia yesterday on the foothills of the North Georgia mountains. This is going to be just east of Dalton, maybe a little bit off to the east of I-75. This is a very large brush fire that did form, and it did scorch a lot of the earth landscape right there. But just giving you an idea about how quickly some of those controlled burns or just uncontrolled burns can spread very rapidly when you have just a little bit of a breeze and the very dry conditions that we've had settle in over the course of the last 2 months. And that risk is really more so elevated here in Central Georgia as compared to North Georgia, because as of recently, they have found themselves get out of the drought monitor. Now up there in Murray County, of course, you still do see some of those yellow shades on the northern portion of your map, like this right here underneath the banner. That just means you have some abnormally dry conditions, really nothing to fret about. But down here towards the south, we haven't gotten as much rain recently as they have up in, say, northeast Georgia, northern Georgia, northwest Georgia. All of Central Georgia still finds themselves in that moderate drought category, with some patches of a severe drought stretching into areas like Chris County, Dooley, and Wilcox, along with this stretch over here going into Johnson County, Emmanuel County, down into Toombs County, Montgomery, Wheeler, and Trutland counties. And then over here to the west, we also see this patch of orange stretching into western Upson County, the very western edge of Taylor County, and a patch of even an extreme drought that stretches up into Spalding and Pike counties just outside of our viewing area. But this was as of last Tuesday. So of course we will get a new update to the drought monitor coming up on Thursday this week, but all the data will be taken as of today. So we will see this thing, or this banner right up here, say as of November 18th once we get into Thursday, and we'll be looking out for the latest update with that drought monitor, because I do anticipate many of the dry and drought conditions to worsen here in Central Georgia. We haven't had anything in the way of rainfall through the entire month of November so far. But good news is we do look to at least bring some rainfall totals into the forecast as we head towards the weekend. So the main headline: near record high temperatures. I was telling you we have to talk about the temperatures for the rest of the work week, and they are going to flirt with some of those record highs all time for those specific days. Quite a 180 from what we were talking about this time last week. Remember, we had our weather impact alert in place for the morning hours. We saw numbers as low as 25 degrees, and we'll have to talk about those morning lows this morning because they were mighty chilly as well. But the mornings will get warmer starting as soon as tomorrow. So I think now that we're out of the morning time frame, so far on your Tuesday, we are going to have more of a pleasant feel as you walk out the door. Still on the chillier side, still something that you may need some light layering for, but definitely not the heavy winter coat or the puffer jacket like what you've needed yesterday morning and this morning. And we do have slim rain chances as we go into the weekend. Emphasis on the slim. We are getting a better idea, at least, of the timing of rain. However, how much rain that is going to fall is still a bit up in the air. So we'll look at all the different things like humidity. We'll look at the timing, obviously what those temperatures are, in order to get a better idea about what kind of environment this frontal boundary that's causing the rain chances will be interacting with. So here's a walk around the quad. Plenty of blue sky for yet another afternoon. As you take a look in downtown Macon, the West Gate here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, downtown Dublin, and over in Warner Robins off Cohen Walker Drive. Take a look at your flags here too at the West Gate of the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Doesn't look like they really have any motion as of right now. As we go into the afternoon and the evening show specifically, be on the lookout for when Ben shows his camera, because we are going to start to see these flags blowing from left to right, indicating that the winds are going to get a shift and start to come in from the south. And that's what's going to begin to push more moisture into our forecast. But so far, temperature-wise, low and mid-60s, even some areas in the upper 60s, 68 in Cochran, 69 in Rochelle and Cordele, and a 70-degree mark all the way down in Vidalia. This is a little bit warmer than, say, this time yesterday, which is kind of funny because the temperatures this morning were a couple degrees below what they were sitting at yesterday morning, but just showing you how much of an increase that we are getting as we head into that warming period here in the late morning time frame. Current temperatures all across the southeast, pretty similar, a little bit cooler up into North Carolina, but Charleston sitting at 67 degrees, 66 over in Montgomery, and then into the low and mid 70s in Panama City and Jacksonville before you get to 78 in Orlando, 79 in New Orleans, and an 81 already in Houston. I imagine some areas of east and southeast Texas are very likely forecasting some 90s later on today, just indicated by the warm spell that they've gotten off to so far this morning. But of course, if they do have some rain chances, then it may inhibit that warm up as you go into around 2, 3, and 4 o'clock. But obviously, haven't really taken too close of a look at the Texas weather today. I'm more concerned with giving you your weather here back in our neck of the woods. Dew point temperatures, a bit of an increase from this morning. We still have some areas that have seen some values down into the 20s, maybe the 30s, but it looks like 40s are the name of the game and the more popular numbers on this dew point temperatures map, indicating that we're starting to get an influx in moisture content. And as we start to get that shift in winds from the south, like I mentioned, that is going to propel maybe even some faint areas of light green onto this map as we go throughout the rest of today. So right now your winds are mainly coming from the southeast direction, but not necessarily directly from the Atlantic. It does look like maybe some moisture from over here in South Carolina is trying to trek into the central Georgia area, but we are going to start to see these winds come more directly from the south later today. And your humidity levels, there's virtually no moisture in the air whatsoever until you get down towards the Savannah area, closer to the Georgia Atlantic coast. There's plenty of humidity back over to the west, plenty of humidity in some areas of northern Florida. And the winds right now still relatively calm, but maybe a sustained wind up to 8 or 9 miles per hour in areas like Cochran and all the way over in Taylor County. Bit of a light breeze paired up with some temperatures that we currently see scattered about the 60s. It's a pretty pleasant environment, especially by fall standards. But let's break down the numbers, because yesterday we were a little bit warmer than anticipated. But we'll start with your morning low temperature. 35 degrees is what we recorded in downtown Macon, which is 7 degrees below your average low of 42 degrees. So the low 40s are pretty common this time of year. That's typically around where we should be sitting at. Definitely not as low as we saw the numbers go today. I think Macon got down to 33 degrees, and the lowest temperature we spotted all morning long was a 30-degree mark in downtown Dublin. But we saw a drastic increase, nearly 40 degrees between that low yesterday into the high temperature of 74, which is 5 degrees above average. So that's been the name of the game, but well below average low temperatures and slightly above average high temperatures, at least for yesterday. We actually saw the numbers near 80 as we went into Sunday afternoon, but 85, your record high for yesterday all time, still about 11 degrees shy of that threshold. That record was set back in 1958. 1901, your record low of 22 degrees for yesterday. Very thankfully, we're not talking about breaking any over 100-year records like we were just a week ago in time. And precipitation, none of that to be found. Your departure of rain is now 0.85 inches above where we should be for the whole year of 2025. We definitely need to get some form of rain in order to keep that number above average, which is stood at for quite some time, almost the entire calendar year. I think we got pretty close to getting back close to average. Then we had a very wet month of August, and that did propel us almost 7 inches above average for that year departure. Well, now that number is down below 1 inch, but it still has a positive in front of it. So for the year of 2025 as a whole, yes, we're doing pretty good, but that just also gives you an idea about the dry stretch as of the last 2 months, maybe even 2.5 months. If that number was 7 point something as of sometime in early September, I want to believe was when it last stood at that. Sunrise 7:07 yesterday, and the sunset was at 5:32. So remember what I was saying as of this extended forecast yesterday. 5:32 p.m. Our earliest sunset that we will see is going to be at 5:27, and that's actually coming up in about 2 weeks' time. I believe it's going to be that first day back from the Thanksgiving holiday, December 1st, which I do believe is on a Monday, but you can double check my math on that. I'm not a walking calendar. Now taking a look at your hour-by-hour temperatures. Upper 60s by noon, and then making the climb into the low and mid 70s around 2, 3, and 4 o'clock. Then as we transition closer to sunset around 5 p.m., your numbers start to decline, and then we're into the mid 60s as you go into 6 p.m. But a bit of a slower cool down this evening as opposed to what we saw, say, last evening or even going back into Sunday evening. And that's because we have a warmer morning low temperature value in store for your Wednesday morning. But for this afternoon, I went the high temperature of 76 degrees. So I had 71 yesterday. We overshot that by about 3 degrees. I went a little bit above what the models and the Meteorogram are saying for today, when that would put us 8 degrees above average. And you do see one of my main headlines today is dress in layers. Well, obviously you're not needing those layers whatsoever anymore. Temperatures are feeling mighty pleasant, but it was a brisk and cold and chilly morning that we did have. So of course, that's why it's kind of that textbook fall weather. You're going to have to utilize a lot of things in the closet in terms of maybe some hoodies. Your laundry hamper is going to get very full very quickly. So I do imagine the frequency of doing laundry this time of year does increase for many of you, including myself. But of course, first day of Stuff the Truck. That's one of our big headlines as well. We've been live in Milledgeville all morning long. Naomi Washington did brave some of those very cold temperatures early this morning at the Walmart on North Columbia Street. And we will have Ansley Parker live there at midday. And then this evening, our own Lori Johnson will be up there at the Milledgeville Walmart. So only the first of 3 days of Stuff the Truck. We'll talk a little more about that in just a moment. Satellite and radar, however, crystal clear. There are some clouds up to the north, maybe even a few light rain showers up into eastern Kentucky, I do believe that is, if I can pick that apart. Should have given a more wide range view in order to pick apart exactly what that is. And then we do see some cloud cover back over into Alabama and Mississippi, some clouds off the Atlantic coast, but overall nothing really in the way of rain chances. So obviously nothing's really interrupting your forecast unless, say, you want to go walk your dog in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But I don't imagine many of you will be doing that this afternoon. Here's a look at what Future View has over the next 3 days, and we will throw some pause points on there. I just wanted to show you that the same way that we've started out this Tuesday morning, we are going to wrap it up around the 5 p.m. hour. Mostly clear skies, maybe a few high-level clouds, kind of like what we did yesterday. Today is a very similar forecast, in fact, to what we did have in store for the beginning of your work week. Now we go into 7 a.m. on Wednesday, so there's some scattered cloud cover, and we actually see some clouds pass through during the overnight hours into early tomorrow morning. But then as we transition into the afternoon, this is going to be our rain chance as we go into tomorrow. I know this is very minuscule. This is not widespread rain whatsoever, but we are getting the uptick in moisture. Remember, I talked about that southerly component to the winds. That's going to propel some moisture from farther down to the south into our neck of the woods, and it may just be enough to sprout a couple of isolated light showers in a select few areas. This is not going to be widespread by any means. You have a far greater likelihood of not receiving rainfall throughout the entirety of tomorrow as opposed to receiving any rain. And whatever you do receive in the way of rain, going to be brief and short-lived. This is going to be a shower, maybe even a sprinkle that only lasts for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then it's out of the picture, and that may be your last glimpse at rain throughout the entirety of this week. So it's definitely not doing anything about putting a dent in our drought conditions that have settled in. But we wrap up Wednesday going into the evening hours, 7 p.m. Still some clouds in the near vicinity of us. We start out Thursday morning with some high-level cloud cover. We've remained pretty consistent amongst the last couple of runs of Future View, with at least seeing some form of cloud cover as you walk outside on Thursday. I don't think it's going to block your sunshine terribly much. I think you are still going to get that very bright imagery as you walk outside, that proper wake-up call. Now we look over to the west. There are a couple light green dots. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a sprinkle on Thursday morning, maybe for that morning commute time, but overall we're picking at straws. I haven't had much to talk about whatsoever, even in the way of clouds on Future View lately. So of course, if we are going to see some rain chances, I want you to know what to expect. And I would say that morning commute time frame is looking like maybe the last chance for at least a sprinkle shower as we go throughout the rest of the midweek and wrap up your short-term forecast before Thursday, right there around sunset. That's when we start to see some signs of some change. We will start to see more widely scattered cloud cover move through, and well, I guess we probably won't get a good glimpse of it because it's more than likely going to be dark already at that point. But that takes us all the way into early on Friday morning. And Friday, I would expect your fair share of at least partly cloudy skies, maybe even into mostly cloudy skies. But then Friday evening, specifically the nighttime frame, we are going to welcome in your next best chance at some widespread rain over the course of the beginning of your weekend. But for the next 3 days, it's going to be a story of above average temperatures. 76 for a high today. We were talking about that. That's 8 degrees above your average high of 68 degrees this time of year. I think we actually saw that number bump down. I've been looking at it so much I can't remember which number is correct in my head. But 50 degrees for a morning low temperature tomorrow, and that's because of the uptick in humidity. If we get those dew point temperatures to continue to rise, then your actual temperatures cannot fall below what those numbers are. So of course, you are going to have some actual temperature values that are a whole lot warmer than what we walked out the door to this morning. In fact, 17 degrees warmer than that morning low temperature of 33 that we hit in Macon today. Then 82 for a high temperature. That is unseasonably warm for this time of year, and average high 68 degrees this time of year, 14 degrees above average. Very thankfully, we're pairing it up with plenty of sunshine. I do have that 10% chance of rain though, however, but that's not going to be everyone. More likely than not, you're just going to be greeted by some mostly sunny skies throughout the day on Wednesday, where we have our second day of the Stuff the Truck, and that's going to be at the Walmart down in Dublin, 55 for a morning low. So the morning lows, they continue to feel more and more pleasant as we go day by day into the end of the work week. 83 for a high temperature on Thursday afternoon. Some mostly sunny skies. I didn't even elect to throw a rain chance on there, even though we still do have some decent humidity. But I think it's going to drop just slightly below the threshold that we need to spark at least a couple of scattered sprinkles in nature. But that will be our last day of Stuff the Truck, and we will be at 2 locations. So going to end it with a bang. We're going to be at the Walmart on Zebulon Road up here in Macon, and we're also going to be down in Houston County, the Warner Robins Walmart on Watson Boulevard. And I myself will be live there for midday. Make sure that you come out, support a great cause, and come say hey to myself. Megan Western will be out there. And I'm not sure who's going to be live during the evening shows, but I'll double check for you and we'll come back, revisit that tomorrow. So for Stuff the Truck forecast for Milledgeville, we're obviously past 8 a.m. Thankfully, those temperatures are far above the number that you see there at 44 degrees. But going into 2 p.m. this afternoon, we'll be somewhere in the mid 70s, 74, maybe getting up to 75 or 76 degrees. And that's around the time frame that we will hit our high temperature. No need for the winter coat whatsoever. Dare I even say maybe even some short sleeves and some shorts weather. Not going to have any reason for mainly any layering whatsoever that you did need to keep yourself insulated and warm in the morning. But then as we go into the evening hours, so I imagine many of you probably can't make it out right there in the middle of the workday, right there in the middle of the school day. If you're planning on visiting the Walmart after you get off of work, well, of course, it's probably going to get dark pretty early. But along with that, we are going to have a slower cool down than what we saw as of yesterday evening. Temperatures right there around 6 to 7 p.m. I do imagine they'll be somewhere in the lower half of the 60s, and eventually they'll make the dip down into the upper 50s as you go closer to around 8 and 9 o'clock. And that's specific for Milledgeville. So I would expect these temperatures to be within about a degree or two of those numbers I showed you up in Baldwin County this evening. But let's talk about your morning low temperatures. Average low this time of year, we were just talking about it on the almanac, 42 degrees. So obviously the 33 that we hit this morning, nearly 10 degrees below average for this time of year and not too far off that freezing temperature. We did have some areas that reached that freezing temperature criteria, but we're getting into the back half of November. Eventually we'll transition into December. In fact, today is about 33 days until the first day of winter. So the cold temperatures are going to become more frequent to welcome you out the door as we go throughout the next couple of months. Go ahead and start getting used to them, but soak this up while it lasts. Temperatures in the mid 50s, near 60 degrees as you walk outside on Saturday. I will take that by all means. The mornings have been nice and brisk and chilly, and I can definitely attest to that since I'm the one getting up at around 2:30 or 3 a.m. each and every morning. So I'm feeling those temperatures at their absolute coldest each and every morning, even taking some steps outside during the show just to give myself a proper wake-up call if the coffee's not necessarily doing the job. But 55 as we go into Thursday morning, 56 on Friday, and then 60 degrees for a morning low temperature on Saturday. And that's also going to be a combination of two factors. Number one, it's the uptick in humidity, and that's really where we see the increase in the morning low values in between Wednesday, Thursday, and into Friday. You will see these dew point temperatures maybe a little bit higher than anticipated. I do expect your dew point temperatures to be pretty similar to what the actual temperatures are tomorrow. So maybe not quite as much humidity as what you see here on the point for Wednesday, because that's in the lower half of the 60-degree dew point box. But of course, that's going to be the middle of the day on Wednesday. So we're still going to be somewhere on this uphill climb as we go into tomorrow morning. And then we are going to keep the humidity at some pretty reasonable levels throughout the rest of Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday, at least at noticeable levels. More moisture than we've had in the forecast really over about the last 2 weeks. So I was saying it this morning, it was a very dry environment. And I, for one, can personally attest to this. I don't even know if you can see this on the screen, but your hands are probably getting very dry. You're starting to get the cracks on your skin and your fingers. Definitely utilize that moisturizer, some form of chapstick as you were heading out the door this morning. But maybe you can avoid it for the next 4-day stretch that we do have until the humidity drops back down as we go into Sunday and eventually into Monday next week. But your afternoon high temperatures will continue to increase along with those morning lows. 82 on Wednesday, 83 on Thursday, still sticking with the low 80s as we go into the end of the work week on Friday, and then back down into the upper 70s. All in all, each of these next 5 afternoons are going to feel pretty similar, just maybe a tad bit on the warmer side tomorrow, Thursday, and into Friday. And in fact, those numbers in the low 80s, not only are they around 14 to 15 degrees above average, but they're going to put some record highs in jeopardy. Yes, that was one of the main headlines I had at the beginning of this. So let's take a look at some of your records. For Wednesday, the record high is going to be 83. So 83 is the record high for tomorrow, and that record was set most recently back in 1942. What I have forecasted is 82 degrees. So if we do the same thing where we've been going a little bit above what the models have been saying, a little bit above what the graphics have been saying, I do imagine that we could at least match that record. Not too much confidence in at least going over that record tomorrow, but I do have a good amount of confidence in beating that record on Thursday. 81 is your record high temperature, most recently back in 1991. What I have forecasted is already 2 degrees above that number, and we're still about 48 hours out, until we get into Thursday afternoon. So it's kind of a consensus. Obviously, you get more confidence if you're farther and farther out and you do see some numbers that are already above that number. We'll continue to fine tune it as we get closer. But once again, going into Friday, we very well could match the record set back in 2011 most recently of 81 degrees. That's exactly what I do have forecasted. So like I said, just quite the swing of weather that we've had over the past week. We broke a record low this time last week. And now we're talking about some record highs that are in jeopardy, feeling like all 4 seasons over the last 2 weeks. But I did mention some end of the work week into the beginning of your weekend rain chances, and that's going to come from this frontal boundary that starts to approach and get really close to us by about the time we get into the afternoon on Friday. I do expect most of that rain to hold off until the nighttime hours, really overnight Friday into early Saturday morning. But we also could see the rain try to stick around, some scattered showers into some portions of your Saturday afternoon, but the long-range models are still not really picking up on widespread rain by any means. We'll go over what the rainfall totals are forecasted by both the GFS and the Euro in just one moment. But right now I wanted to show you this specifically for the timing. And we can see Saturday at 3 p.m., maybe some partly cloudy skies, maybe still a few spotty showers here and there. But as we go into Sunday morning, looks like most of that rain is already out of the picture. Frontal boundary has exited stage right. And what is going to take over? It's going to be some slightly cooler and slightly drier air. But it's actually only going to knock the numbers maybe back closer to average, because we're well above average right now. We would need a big, potent Arctic air mass to start to move in order to drop those numbers back below average. But it doesn't look like this front is going to necessarily do the job at giving us a cold spell as we go into the end of the weekend and the beginning of next week. Sunday at 5 p.m., still remaining dry. Monday looks to be a relatively calm day. Then we go into Tuesday. Our next weather maker is shaping up over to the west of us. The GFS has this trending like, okay, maybe we're going to see some rain right there before Thanksgiving, maybe even getting into the Wednesday before it. But the European over here has your widespread rain chances still back over into Oklahoma, east and northern Texas. So we're not seeing a lot of model agreement right now. I do have a good idea, a general idea about what is going to happen Thanksgiving, but we'll talk about that more when we flash up the 7-day. So let's go ahead and talk about your future view rainfall totals. GFS right here, so that green shaded model that you just saw, that has our rain chances starting to move in around 3 a.m. on Saturday. So like I said, the nighttime hours, overnight Friday into early on Saturday morning. And then as we progress all the way through this model run, it looks like maybe about a 1/4 inch of rain. Not very impressive whatsoever. We've seen this as of the last couple of times we've been looking at rain chances well ahead of time, and that obviously hasn't really done anything for our drought conditions whatsoever. But then we go over to the European model, a bit of a higher resolution on this, which just means that we can see the rainfall totals in some localized areas a bit better. It has our rain chances number 1 already into Wednesday afternoon, overnight into Thursday. A couple of those isolated sprinkles, maybe even some spotty light showers. But then it looks like the bulk of the rain starts to move through and starts to pop up once again Friday night into early Saturday morning. So that's why I have a lot more confidence in at least the timing of this, because this is 2 days in a row we've been talking about that general idea of the Friday night into Saturday morning timing. But here you can see once again most of your totals right there around 1/10 of an inch, about a 1/4 inch, but some isolated pockets of maybe seeing about 1 inch of rain. This doesn't mean that Cordele is going to get exactly 1 inch of rain as we go across the course of this week into the weekend, but it does give you a better idea that some localized areas could be a bit luckier than, say, the rest of central Georgia. But hopefully we can continue to see maybe more moisture available, maybe this frontal boundary pass through a little bit later into the afternoon hours on Saturday, and that would spark some more widespread rain chances. But right now, it doesn't look to necessarily be too big of a rainmaker in terms of some heavy rainfall totals, but it does look like everyone should look out and at least see a little bit, a minuscule amount of some rain. Tropics outlook, no activity still expected in the next 7 days. You can probably guess by now that each time I show you this graphic, it is going to look like that. I don't have much confidence in any more named storms or any other potential areas of development for the rest of your hurricane season, which will wrap up on November 30th. So your 7-day forecast continues to be highlighted by well above average high temperatures, and along with that, some well above average morning low temperatures, especially if we get to 60 degrees to start out Saturday morning. That's also going to be due to the fact that we have some pretty dense cloud cover in the forecast that is blocking any of that radiation going back out into the atmosphere during the overnight hours when it typically does. So that's why Saturday morning is forecasted to be at least the warmest of the next couple of mornings, but it's also going to be a bit of a dreary forecast as a lot of that rain will still be present. Say if you're waking up at 7 or 8 a.m. getting ready to watch College Game Day, going out to get some breakfast, that morning coffee. But I don't have too much of a rain chance, only about a 20% chance for the nighttime hours on Friday and about a 30% chance of rain on Saturday. I could still see some showers sticking around into the second half of your Saturday, even lingering as late as Sunday. So I do have a 10% chance of rain as we go into the last day of the weekend. All in all, these aren't very impressive rain chances whatsoever. Do not see these and say, oh, I need to go cancel my outdoor plans for Saturday. No, still let them fly. Just be prepared to duck and dodge. So a couple of isolated showers. I wouldn't even rule out a rumble of thunder as of right now, but we aren't really seeing anything too impressive in the way of a widespread rainmaker and some very messy weather that you don't want to be outside for. But then we do see the numbers starting to bump down into the mid 70s as we roll into next week. And then as we get closer to Thanksgiving, I'm thinking right there the day before Thanksgiving or on Thanksgiving itself, it could be a bit of a messy turkey day as another front will make its way through, because a lot of the long range models do hint at a pretty good cool down for the weekend after Thanksgiving. I'm talking high temperatures down into the 60s, and I'm talking about some morning low values that will get back down into the 30s, a little bit below average. So that does give me a good idea that some form of a frontal boundary is going to come through. Don't know how much rain it's going to send us whatsoever as of right now, but it does look like a cool Arctic air mass is going to be on its way as we transition into Black Friday, that last regular season weekend of college football, and eventually into the beginning of the new month, which will be December, our last month of the calendar year of 2025, which is very hard to believe. But continue to stay updated with us. We'll be keeping a close eye on your high temperatures Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to see if we make a run at any of those record highs. That's going to do it for your extended forecast today. Be sure to tune in once again 11 a.m. tomorrow, and we'll have the latest breakdown of your forecast.